My boss once told me, right to my face, that women don't belong in construction. He laughed at my ideas, humiliated me in front of my coworkers, and treated me like I was worthless. But what he didn't know was that I was paying attention. And when he crossed one line too many, I didn't just get revenge, I ended his entire career. If you've ever been underestimated or told you're not good enough, you're gonna love this story. Hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready, because this is one of the most satisfying revenge stories you'll hear today. I worked at a mid-sized construction company in Chicago for almost 4 years. I actually liked the work, project planning, budgeting, supervising crews, but I hated my boss, Rick. Rick believed women didn't belong in construction, period. No matter how much effort I put in, no matter how solid my ideas were, he'd shoot me down. And he didn't do it quietly. In front of the whole team, he'd smirk and say things like, "Leave the real work to men. You stick to paperwork, sweetheart." Do you know how humiliating that feels? To spend hours perfecting a plan, only to be laughed at because of your gender? My coworkers would look away, too scared to say a word, and I'd sit there holding back my anger, telling myself if I just worked harder, maybe he'd finally respect me. Spoiler, he never did. The breaking point came when I discovered he was using cheap, substandard steel on a huge state contract. This wasn't just shady accounting, this was dangerous. The kind of steel that bends under weight, and he was planning to use it in schools, bridges, office buildings. I confronted him in private, hoping maybe he'd at least listen. He leaned back in his chair, grinning like he always did, and said, "Sweetheart, if you like your job, you'll forget what you saw." That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped. For years, I'd tolerated his sexism, his disrespect, his ego, but risking people's lives? That was a line he couldn't cross without paying for it. So I started planning, quietly. I began collecting evidence, copies of invoices, shady supplier emails, photos of the steel that didn't match the specs. I kept everything hidden on a flash drive in my bag. I worked late, pretending to finish paperwork, while really building a case against him. It took 2 months, but by the end, I had a mountain of proof, enough to bury him. Now, the question was, what do I do with it? Rick bragged constantly about his connections. If I went through normal company channels, the evidence would vanish. So I went straight to the state regulatory authority. And just to make sure it couldn't be swept under the rug, I also sent the files, anonymously, to a journalist I trusted. And then I waited. I'll never forget the day it all started unraveling. I walked into the office and something felt different. People were whispering in corners, phones ringing nonstop, Rick pacing like a caged animal. By lunchtime, state inspectors showed up. I watched his face turn pale as they started asking questions. He tried to act tough, but by the end of the day, he stormed out without a word. Within weeks, the project was shut down. His company was blacklisted. And that article? It blew up online. The headline called him "the man who risked hundreds of lives for greed." All those connections he bragged about, gone. Nobody wanted to touch him. And me? I expected to get fired. Honestly, I was ready for it. But instead, I got a call from one of Rick's biggest competitors. They said, "We need someone with backbone. How about joining us?" Today, I'm a project manager at a company where my ideas are actually valued, where I'm not dismissed just because I'm a woman. And Rick, he's done. The man who once told me construction was no place for women doesn't even have a place in construction anymore. The sweetest part wasn't just watching him lose everything, it was seeing his face that day when the walls started closing in. The man who mocked me, belittled me, treated me like dirt, reduced to silence. Watching his empire collapse under the weight of his own corruption. That was justice. That was my revenge. In the end, I didn't just stand up for myself. I protected people who might have been walking across bridges built with his garbage steel. And I proved a point that when you underestimate someone, when you keep pushing them down, you might just create the very person who takes you out. If my story gave you chills, hit that like button and share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Because trust me, this isn't the last tale of sweet, sweet payback.